Well, good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to you all. I'm thrilled to moderate today's session with Roderic O'Gorman, which is being hosted by E3 Trinity College Dublin. Roderic is a prominent figure in Irish politics, and he is a former Minister for Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, and also is a passionate advocate for our environment. And as we gather here today on World Environment Day, there couldn't be, I suppose, a more important moment to delve into some of the critical environmental challenges and opportunities that lie before Ireland and the wider world. And Roderic has been, I suppose, instrumental in shaping policies that profoundly impact or affect, should I say, families and young people and for our collective future. So we're truly honoured to have him here today to open up World Environment Day at Trinity College Dublin. So just to set the scene, World Environment Day, which is observed annually on June the 5th, is the United Nations principal vehicle for encouraging worldwide awareness and action for the protection of our environment. And this year's theme focuses on combating plastic pollution. And recent research has suggested that microplastics are now in almost everything that exists on Earth, including the human brain. So the 2025 World Environment Day calls for action to try and tackle plastic pollutions. So to begin our conversation today, Roderic, as we observe World Environment Day, what does this day represent for you as a political leader, but also an environmental advocate?
Good morning, Michael, and good morning to everyone else joining today. Thanks for all of you for coming to help us celebrate World Environmental Day. So I suppose in the Green Party, we'd say a little bit tongue-in-cheek, every day is Environmental Day for us because of, I suppose, the focus of our politics. But I think World Environment Day is really important. It gives us an opportunity, first of all, to reflect on the importance, the value of our environment, and that value is seen globally in terms of everything our environment does. The Amazon being a kind of a loan for our planet, our seas and currents, keeping Ireland warm, keeping it ice free throughout most of the year. But also the local, the immediate value that our environment does for us in terms of just the ability to go out for a walk in your local park, and the peace of mind that brings, the improvement in mental health that walking in nature brings to us. So World Environment Day allows us to think about the value. It allows us to think about the challenges, the huge challenges that our environment face. And you just mentioned one there in terms of plastic pollution in our waters, in our streams, in our seas. We'll probably be talking about our challenges around climate later on, challenges to biodiversity, to nature, to the erosion of nature in far many two parts of our planet. And it also then lets us think about the solutions. What are we going to do about it? What are the laws? What are the policies? What are the financial investments that we can make globally or locally to actually help us solve some of those real risks to environment that we see?
I'd be interested in maybe just from your perspective, if you could give us maybe a little bit of background to yourself and how you actually got into politics.
Well, I first went out canvassing for the Green Party when I was 10 years old in the 1992 general election. So I've been involved with the Green Party for a long time. And I suppose for me, it came from, when I was growing up, my parents, they wouldn't have been very political, but the environment, our local area, animals, treating the environment well, tidying up, picking up litter, those would all have been things we regarded as important as a family. And when my mom said, well, there's this organization, this political party that wants to put the environment and nature first, I was like, sign me up. That sounds like my sort of thing. So they got me in at 10, and they haven't been able to shake me since. So I joke that I came for the nature, but I stayed for the social justice, because the Green Party also has a very strong social justice element to it. And that was something that I was able to lead out on in the context of my own Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. So for me, the Greens have never just been about the environment, but it is really important, in my view, that we have a Green Party, because the Green Party will always ensure that environmental issues are at very front of centre of political discussion and political decision making, because I would always argue where other parties talk about the environment, they aren't going to bring it to the center of every decision, whereas the Green Party does.
And Ireland has set itself quite ambitious climate targets. And from your own perspective, are we on track to meet them? And what do you feel are the biggest obstacles to try and meet those targets, considering, I suppose, the recent announcements last week from the EPA, who, I suppose, in terms of recent assessment, have highlighted that Ireland's emissions are actually increasing in some sectors. So I suppose that underscores the urgency of addressing these obstacles. So I'd be very interested in hearing your perspective on why the bottlenecks truly lie, or where they actually truly lie.
And when the Green Party were part of the last government, we actually took those ambitious targets and we put them into law. And I think that was really important in terms of creating a legal mechanism and a legal requirement on all government departments and all state agencies, on all part of official Ireland, to work towards meeting those targets. And we've had some success. I think it is important we say that. In 2022, we reduced our emissions by 2%, not a lot, but starting to move. In 2023, we got that emission reduction up to almost 7%. So last 2023, our emissions were the lowest they'd been in 30 years. So progress momentum was building. And I suppose I have a worry that momentum may be lost now, because I don't see that same focus on taking the steps to support businesses, to support farmers, to support individuals cut their emissions that we saw during the Green Party's period in government. And where are the challenges? There's a big challenge in transport. We know that's going to be one of the toughest areas to change. And that's why we need to make public transport more attractive to people, to passengers, to commuters, make them feel that they want to make that choice to change available to them. And for those who can't make the choice, who need a car, increase the availability of e-cars, make that more affordable for people as well, make that change something that's attractive to them. In areas like our built environment, we have to continue the major retrofitting plan that has started. That is allowing people save money in their own homes in terms of cutting their energy bills at a time when we saw such huge spikes in energy bills following the war in Ukraine. And across wider elements of our economy as well, supporting businesses to make the change, supporting farmers to make the change with effective targeted grants that actually, again, so I very much believe we can help people make that change and help in a way that actually saves them money in the long term. So we have to make a huge change as a country, but the government needs to be stepping up with people, backing them up at all time to make those important changes.
I suppose shifting our focus maybe to some of those local level issues, what role do you feel do communities and local activism plays in trying to achieve our national climate goals?
I think it's really important in terms of understanding and in terms of information about what needs to be achieved. And I think the local action can be really important in linking in climate with the biodiversity, with the nature side as well, because I think there has been a huge focus on the challenge that we have in meeting our emission reduction targets in recent years. And maybe that sometimes overshadowed the huge loss of biodiversity, the huge loss of nature that we've seen in Ireland and around the world as well. And I think you've seen that really being pushed back against by local communities in recent years. You see tidy towns groups, and I even see that in my own area in Blanchardstown and Castleknock, where the tidy towns group used to be all about cutting every shrub and every grass verge within an inch of its life. Now it's a focus on, well, let's have biodiversity patches, let those dandelions grow, let those thistles grow, let the nettles grow, create habitats, these little micro habitats, even in very urban areas where insects, where small animals, where birds can actually get food, where they can nest, where they can live and grow. that local activity is actually huge, and you see that change across wide parts of Dublin now. The approach that councils are taking to the maintenance of public spaces is changing, because local groups have said, we actually don't want you to mow that field within an inch of its life. We actually think we leave a patch of it, where the grass grows long and flowers grow, wildflowers. What we would have called weeds 5 years ago, we now see as an important part of nature and something that's worth protecting.
I think that's such an important point. We often see the national targets, but it's actually the grassroots levels, or the efforts from grassroots in terms of community gardens to local recycling initiatives. There, for me, I think some of the real engine of change on the ground. We often hear that phrase, think global, act local, and I think that's really in that regard.
And it makes what we're doing on the global level tangible for people. And I go back to me as a 10-year-old. Like, my parents had brought me out to kind of on nature walks, going out to see badgers coming out of their sets at night, and that made the environment tangible for me, and that made me passionate about doing the things that's necessary to protect that. And particularly for young people, I think getting them involved at a local level and actually doing something in their own community gives them a buy-in to what is being done at the national level, but even up to the global level as well.
I suppose moving on to legal frameworks, they often provide the necessary teeth for environmental policy. And I suppose without robust enforcement, I suppose even the best intentional laws can fall short. And I suppose, given your academic background, having lectured in climate change law, how important do you believe legal enforcement is, I suppose, in driving environmental progress?
I think it's a key element of it. Again, particularly where you have a country like Ireland, where for a long time very little was done in terms of cutting our carbon emissions, it was important to build a legal framework, both as a kind of a stick in terms of if the targets aren't reached, there is the possibility of legal action, but also just to build it into the system that we have to do this. This isn't just, the Greens or the environmentalists talking. It is actually part of our law now. This assessment and understanding and this effort to reduce our carbon emissions has to be part of what every government department does, what every county and city council does, what every government funded organisation does. It mainstreams it in a way that hadn't been done before. But it is important to say that the legal element isn't the only thing. There's finance, there's the actual money to do stuff. So the budget every year, the decisions that are made in terms of where the state's money is allocated, is invested. Those decisions are really important as well. So I think lawyers can sometimes fall into the trap of thinking, if we put in place the legal frameworks, that'll do the job. As a lawyer, sometimes I would have thought that in the past. Having sat in cabinet now and seen, I suppose, the complexity of the decision-making process, I'd say the legal element is a key part, but it isn't the only part. And the decisions that flow from it and the political decisions about where we spend our money as a country, where we spend our time as a government, what we focus on. Because what I found as a minister was the most precious resource I had wasn't actually the money that was allocated to me every year by the Minister for Finance. That was very important, but actually the most important thing was my time. What issue did I give the time to actually progress, to actually really champion? Because I had a very big department and everything was really important and you couldn't do everything. So you had to prioritize, you had to give your time to certain issues. And for me, what I've seen is with the new government, you're not seeing that focus on climate, on environment, on nature. And I'm not saying it's necessarily like deliberate, but it's just not a priority in the way it was in the last government. And when it's not a priority, something doesn't get the time that it needs to push through new laws, to push through new policies, and to keep an eye on them, making sure they're actually delivering in the way that they need to.
And I suppose reflecting back at your tenure in government, what climate policies passed during that time are you most proud of, and what do you see as the next, I suppose, crucial steps?
Well, I think the climate law, the Climate Action and Low Carbon Act, I think was hugely important. In terms of a kind of a day-to-day policy, something I was really proud of was in 2022, we were able to secure a 20% reduction of all public transport charges across the board. And we brought in this special young adult travel card that halves the cost of public transport for anyone between the age now of 19 and 25, be they a college student, be they in further education, be they working. For everyone, it's halved. And I thought that was really important because we have to, because transport is such a key air driver of our increasing levels of emissions, but B, if we're to make public transport more attractive, we have to be rewarding commuters. We have to be rewarding passengers. And for years, and as someone who, prior to being a minister and now after being a minister, I use public transport every day. I was seeing the cost, every year, little increase. And the 20% cut we brought in 2022 was the first time since the mid-40s that public transport costs had actually gone down in a significant sense. So that makes public transport more attractive. It will help to encourage people because people say, God, it's actually quite affordable now. So I think it's a small issue, but I do think it's important that as well as making those policies that achieve our climate goals, we have to be making it easier for people as well and making it just that little bit more affordable for everybody, but particularly for young adults to actually use public transport, I think was a really important step. I'd love to see more of that happen in the future. I'd love to see another cut in public transport charges. I'd love to see the government really commit to delivering some of those big public transport projects for Dublin, for our other cities, for linking our cities. I think that's really important. I think that focus on making it easier for commuters, for families, for businesses, for farmers, making it easier for them by coming in with the financial support to make the big changes that they need to make, like, putting in insulation or putting in a heat pump. It's a really big investment. It's expensive. So it's important the government are there kind of lockstep with people, helping them to make that change.
And from your perspective, what do you see are the most urgent environmental issues that Ireland should tackle over the next 5 years?
Well, those two linked issues of climate and biodiversity are absolutely huge. So we need to continue the progress that was made over the last 4 years in terms of reducing our emissions. And we need to continue investing in nature in our country, protecting habitats, protecting species that are at risk, making sure we have the experts in organizations like the National Parks and Wildlife Service who can actually go out there and ensure that our national parks can provide protection, making sure we're protecting our seas as well. One big regret for the Green Party is we started this marine protection areas legislation, but unfortunately we didn't get it finished by the end of our time in government. I'd love to see that really progressed. You might have seen even recently there's concern about certain fishers taking all the sprat out of the sea, those really small fish, but by taking them all out, you ruin feed for larger fish, and therefore you interfere with the livelihood of other fishers and indeed for animals and other fish as well. So protecting our seas is absolutely fundamental as well. And, we have a massive marine area around Ireland. It's important for fishing. It's important we'll use some of it for wind turbines in the future. And that'll be really important for giving us cheap, clean energy. But we have to know where are the areas we put the turbines versus where are the areas we leave clear for birds, for fish. So it's about getting all of that put in place. And I think that's really urgent for the new government to complete. And again, I'm just not seeing that urgency there.
And could you share an example of a climate or a biodiversity initiative that you believe deserves a lot more public attention or recognition?
A specific initiative. I think the national retrofit plan has been hugely important. I think in 2024 just short of 60,000 homes across the country had some element of retrofit. Some of them was a complete retrofit done by government for free for maybe families in the socioeconomic disadvantage. Others were grants towards certain retrofits. But I think that scheme is hugely important. It's good for climate because these retrofitted homes are using less energy, but it's good for people as well. It allows them reduce their bills, get more control over their own finances, but it also means their homes are going to be warmer and they're actually going to be a nicer home to live in. So it has financial benefits, it has personal and health benefits, and it has climate benefits as well.
And I suppose, considering Ireland's position, what should our country's role be on the global stage when it comes to climate leadership?
I think we can have a really important role. And, Ireland, for our small size, has an important footprint internationally. We do that, I think, because we're an unaligned country, because I suppose we're a former colony and we understand the experiences of many other countries around the world who were colonies as well. And I think we see it through, we have a very strong international aid program, and in many of the countries where we're providing aid through Irish Aid or other organizations, we link that with climate objectives as well. So we support maybe farmers around the Sahara who are actually, as well as growing crops on their land, actually planting trees to try and stop the spread of deserts or the like, those very important programs. So for example, last week I actually met the climate minister of Vanuatu, which is a small Pacific island nation, only about 300,000 people, but he was here in Ireland looking for Ireland to support a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. So asking all the countries of the world to sign up, saying we won't build new fossil fuel mining, new kind of oil wells, new gas rigs, because fossil fuels are fueling climate change, and climate change literally puts the existence of these island nations at risk. Like Vanuatu's future, the actual physical future of this chain of islands is at risk from climate change, at risk from sea level rise. So irrespective of the challenges we face in Ireland from climate change, the physical existence of our country isn't at risk. But for Vanuatu, for other small nations, their physical existence is at risk. And I think Ireland should be providing a leadership as a small country, as a country that's always valued kind of that independent voice we have on international issues. We can provide a really strong leadership there. And in fairness, when Eamon Ryan was in the Department of Climate, he did that. He was one of the leading European ministers in the last two COP negotiations and helped achieve some of those agreements that came out of those COP negotiations.
And I suppose, thinking about our higher education institutions, I'm just wondering, from your own perspective, what role do you feel they have in supporting sustainability and biodiversity and climate change, and how can future governments support them in this role or mission?
Look, I think they have a key role in terms of educating young people and making sure that the skill set we need, whether it's apprentices to undertake retrofits, whether it's the engineers who are going to design our offshore wind farms, whether it's the climate experts who will tell us what kind of crops are necessary and will support farmers, but will support our carbon reduction emission targets as well. That education piece is really important. The piece to actually educate the wider public and that public advocacy role that our universities play is central as well. So I think it's really important that government is working and funding that kind of work across our third level sector.
I suppose, moving across then to maybe your take up of your leadership position at the Green Party, during which is probably a challenging period of time. And we know that elections can be harsh, but they also can be a fantastic opportunity to get valuable feedback and, I suppose, understanding the public's perceptions and concerns, especially around issues around the cost of living and specific policy implementation, which is, I suppose, very, very important for any political party, I think, in this country. And I suppose my question would be, following the disappointing results in the recent elections, I suppose, what key lessons are you going to take forward from your own experience? And more specifically, why do you think, I suppose, the Green Party struggled in the last election in particular?
Well, we had a very disappointing general election result. We went from 12 seats down to 1 seat, my own seat. And I think it was disappointing for us because we felt we had achieved many of the things we set out to achieve in 2020 when we ran in that general election, when we said we wanted to make, start a decade of work on climate action. That's what we did in government. So, we done what we committed to do. I think the biggest challenge we faced, and it's one that I could see from, because I regularly go knocking on doors, and I was back at it last Friday even in my own constituency. During our time in government, we had been linked with this idea that the initiatives that the Green Party are taking, initiatives to protect nature and reduce our emissions, are going to cost the ordinary public money. And across our time in government, we'd actually worked really hard to take steps that would save people money. So I talked about the public transport reductions earlier on. I talked about the support for grants that will allow people to have lower energy costs. I've talked about the support we've given to farmers, maybe to put solar panels on their roofs, again, reducing their electricity bills for running milking parlours and the like. All of these were cost-saving measures, but we didn't spend enough time talking about them. I think we were always saying, look, we need to do more on climate. And I suppose as a party, we're driven by this mission that climate is this existential threat to us all, and we need to do so much. But we actually should have taken it back to the politics. We should have recognized that our political opponents were out there always saying the Greens are costing you money. And we didn't push back against that narrative immediately every single time. And that was a political mistake we made. And even in my own department, like one of the things I'm proudest about in my department was I was able to cut the cost of childcare for thousands of families across the country. Still too expensive, and there's still a lot to be done there. But for many people, we were able to up to half the cost of their childcare, and that's a big deal. But again, as a party, we should have been saying all the time, the Greens want to achieve these environmental goals, but we also want to save people money as well. And we didn't put in that second line, and we allowed others, our political rivals, shape that narrative. And indeed, the Michael O'Learys and of this world who are always out there to give us a kick, we let them shape the narrative. I think we felt, if we did good work, it would kind of speak for itself. But in politics, nothing speaks for itself. You have to speak for it. You have to make the case for it every single day. So that's certainly something that I will learn next for the future as we look to rebuild the party over the next 4 years. We always show what we're doing is actually going to make life easier for people. And when people, say something that's incorrect about us, we hit back, and we hit back hard.
And I suppose, what message do you want to send out to those who supported the Green Party in the past, but may have lost confidence in recent times?
Well, I would say that we did do what we said we'd do in 2020. We delivered, and that was our manifesto title, Greens deliver in the general election. So I think that is important in terms of, because plenty of parties talk about the importance of the environment, but when they have the opportunity, they either don't go into government, so they don't achieve the policies they said they wanted to achieve, or they go into government and the environment just slides down the list of priorities. So I think we did go into government, and it's a risk for a small party to go into government. And you've already spoken to the consequences of that risk for us, 11 of my colleagues losing their seats. But we not only take the risk, but we actually deliver as well. So that's the first point I would say. We know how to deliver. We know how to make change to help the environment in government. And secondly, we know how to do that in a way that actually supports people and makes life easier for people. But we just have to be better at speaking about that second piece.
Youth engagement. I suppose we know that it's really, really important, and we know that there are many, many different surveys that consistently show young people are deeply concerned about climate change. But translating that into political action and party support is obviously quite a challenge across many different countries. I'm just wondering, have you thought about how you're going to reconnect with younger voters and environmental activists who are actually passionate about these issues, but may kind of feel, I suppose, a little bit delusional or delusion, should I say, about some of those topics?
Well, I think votes from young people was important in 2019 and 2020 when we had those two very successful elections, both in terms of their votes themselves, but actually encouraging family members to step up and support the Greens, many for the first time as well. And look, we're very lucky to have a very vibrant young Green organisation, our youth wing, which is very active and remains active across universities across the country. I think there is still real passion among young people for climate action. I think many young people recognize that the decisions that are taken now will have a huge impact across their lives. Like, I'm in my 40s now, but decisions that are taken by the last government and this government will impact the entirety of the lives of many young people who are, will be voting soon or are just able to vote. So I think their views and their impact is hugely important.
I suppose looking ahead, what's your vision for rebuilding and strengthening the Green Party over the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, we're working at a strategic plan at the moment, and I suppose our central mission there is to rebuild the Green Party so we're in a position to make change, make political change in local authorities, in the Dáil, in the European Parliament, in the Northern Ireland Assembly as well, because we're the one party, North and South. So it's about rebuilding our strength, rebuilding our political representation, so we can continue that work of making change, environmental change, social change, political change. That's what we want to achieve, and that's done by making sure we vibrant organizations around the country, vibrant local groups, that we pick strong candidates, that we give them the support that they need to actually run strong campaigns over a long period of time, and that we're able to get councillors and MEPs elected in the European local elections in June of 2029. And when there is a general election, either just before or just after that, we're in a position to retake seats all over the country.
I'd like to maybe just move towards kind of talking a little bit more around youth and equality and community. When you were in government, your department addressed some of the most vital issues facing families and young people in Ireland today. And I'm just wondering, how do you see climate justice intersect with social justice in this context?
Yeah, we had a very wide remit within my department, and I actually deliberately chose a department that wasn't centred on climate action, wasn't centred on the environment, because, as I spoke earlier on, I've always seen the Greens as not just being about climate. I know a lot of people pigeonhole us; they're the Environment Party and nothing else. That's never been the case. And it's never been my belief. And I thought that's why it was important to take on a department that had many social elements. And again, I saw my role, particularly as Minister for Children, as helping families, helping parents, making life easier for them. And in my years before I became a TD, before I became a minister, when I was a councillor, and even just when I was just a local rep in the area, people would say the cost of childcare, it's like a second mortgage. So I'm asking families to think about the environment, to think about climate, to think about the changes they make. They're saying to me, Roderic, I'd love to, but right now we're struggling to pay the childcare, or right now we're struggling to find a childcare place locally. So if I can make life a bit easier for families on those things, it gives them a bit more scope to think about other things, to think about the arguments I'm putting forward. So that's why I think it's really important for environmental parties, green parties, to be conscious that the focus of many of the voters we meet every day isn't on climate, because there's just so much going on in people's lives. So if we can make their lives a little bit easier by dealing with the things, the challenges they're facing, I think they will look to support us in terms of the work that needs to be done on the issue of climate. So I suppose that's how I bring in the social justice and the environmental justice. I want to make life easier for people so we can actually move the focus on to the big changes that I feel are necessary to undertake.
And I think that's a very important kind of intersection. Climate change disproportionately affects the most vulnerable communities, both globally and locally. So ensuring that climate action doesn't, I suppose, further, exacerbate existing inequalities, but actually rather address them, I think is fundamental to climate justice. I'm just wondering, how is Ireland working to really ensure that young people feel empowered to shape the futures, both environmentally but also socially?
Well, we've done a lot in Ireland in terms of youth participation, and that was actually a key element of my former department. We've a whole unit of the department designed around youth participation, and we've built mechanisms whereby young people can contribute to consultations on new government policies. So I remember even I was in government during COVID, and there was a consultation about the use of masks in schools. So my department made sure that some young people were actually able to give their views to the experts in terms of what would be the day-to-day impact of them wearing a mask in the classroom setting. The youth travel card that I spoke about earlier on, that was actually an initiative that came from Corlin and Nogue. So Corlin and Nogue are the national network of youth kind of spokespeople in each counties. They're linked to local authorities, to county and city councils, and they advocate for young people in that particular county. And across the country, they'd come up with this idea of a free travel card for young people. I said, guys, I don't know if we can get you free, but we can get a half price one. So I see that as an initiative coming from young people and actually, making a change, making a really noticeable policy change in our country. So I think Ireland is quite good at this. It's not to say we can be complacent. There's always room for improvement, but a lot has been achieved on that front.
How do we ensure that climate action isn't just something that only, the middle class or urban communities can engage in, but that actually it's accessible to all?
Well, politicians need to be very clear that it is always the most vulnerable in society who will suffer the most from the negative effects of climate. So if our temperatures are, warmer every year or colder at winter every year, that's going to require more energy, whether it's cool, air conditioners or heaters, and that puts more pressure on the budgets of low income families. We see it's the most vulnerable, it's poor people, poor farmers scraping a living at the edge of deserts, it's poor fishermen whose low lying villages are being flooded. It is always the most vulnerable who are most risk from climate change. So that's why we need to lessen the increases in climate change. But government also has to support those most vulnerable in terms of the changes. And that's why we spoke about retrofitting earlier on. Whereas there's a grant system for all households, there is an actual system for low-income households where the complete cost of a full retrofit of the house is met by the state, and they don't have to make any contributions. So about 7,000 or 8,000 homes across the country have been done that way. I'd love to see that scheme rolled out where we, are making homes that are more energy efficient, but also that actually benefit families who have far lower energy bills as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's all about ensuring that, climate friendly choices are, I suppose, firstly, they're affordable, but they're also practical for everybody,
And
regardless of.
again, something even like public transport, because
Yeah,
we'd be very aware not everybody can afford to change their car and maybe go to an e-car right now. But for people who can't even afford any car, even a fuel car at the moment, they use public transport. So we make public transport more affordable for everybody. We are again benefiting those who probably need that extra bit of support, that extra bit of cash in their pocket at the end of the month the most.
moving to, I suppose, inclusion and rights and even the issues facing refugees, you played a kind of quite a central role in Ireland's response to the war in Ukraine and advancing important equality legislation. I'm just wondering, how do these commitments connect to the core green values?
Well, a core green value is the value of non-violence, and we were seeing the consequences of violence on the European continent at a massive scale from February 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. And as minister, I was, tasked with having to respond to the accommodation needs of people arriving here, and across the successive 18 months, over 100,000 people arrived here, some for short periods, some for longer. And though it was a struggle, we were able to provide accommodation for everybody, and this was in the midst of a housing crisis. Now it was basic accommodation in many circumstances. It wasn't luxury, and it wasn't easy in terms of having to rely primarily on hotels, on guest houses, and subsequently on people renting out rooms to Ukrainians. But we were able to do it, and I know from meeting with Ukrainians, and I remember meeting people at the time who were literally fleeing bombs falling on their cities. The huge gratitude from the tens of thousands of Ukrainians who passed through Ireland for the support that was given by the Irish government, but particularly by communities across the country, because the government wouldn't have been able to respond at that degree of scale if it hadn't been for the support of communities all over the country.
Yeah, I think it's often said that environmentalism at its core is about compassion and, I suppose, recognition of interdependence, which are definitely values that resonate with human rights and humanitarian responses. I suppose reflecting on Ireland's refugee response, what did our country learn about the experiences that we applied to long-term integration strategies?
I think the importance of investing in the infrastructure and investing in the expertise who can actually deliver that. And that's why what I was particularly pleased to bring about was this idea of new local authority integration plans. So, local authority integration teams. So now across every council, city and county council across the country, there are a group of public servants paid for by my department, now by the Department of Justice, but actually working as part of the local authority, who are all about supporting people in Ireland, whether they be refugees, whether they be Ukrainians, whether they be in the international protection process, to help them better integrate with jobs, with education, with services here in Ireland. So for the duration of their stay, ensure that they are able to integrate and be part of local communities. And that was amazing, particularly on Ukrainian side, how Ukrainians joined in so many, whether it's local sports teams. I know in some rural parts of Ireland, schools were actually able to save a teacher because suddenly they had more students because Ukrainians were living in the area. So they were actually able to save that teacher in small rural schools that was at risk of being sent elsewhere due to depopulation in the area.
I suppose before we conclude our chat, as we mark World Environment Day, what gives you hope for the future of our planet and for politics?
What gives me hope is the change that I've seen kind of in local areas in terms of people who previously saw their environmentalism as a battle with the environment every day, and like cutting hedges, having everything super neat and tidy, to that change now where people are actually quite happy to have a bit of wildness in an urban area because they see the value that it has. So people's views can change and people's approach can change, and they can actually, communities can mobilize to support that change. So on a very local level, that gives me hope that people want to see nature protected. They see the value to it, and when people see a value to something, they will fight to preserve it. So that gives me hope. And on the global level, Ireland, we've discussed, Ireland is struggling to meet its carbon emission reduction targets, but most other European countries look like they'll meet them. So it is possible to do that. Now, many of those countries have been working on this for much longer. It was only really in the last 4 or 5 years Ireland got serious about this. So we mightn't meet those 2030 targets, but I do think targets for 2040, and particularly those 2050 targets, I do think we can make them if we work, and apply ourselves to these changes and actually support, families, communities, farmers, businesses, support them, make those changes as well. So it's a challenge, it's a struggle, but it can be done. It's been done elsewhere, and I absolutely believe we can do it here in Ireland as well.
I think that's quite a powerful note to end. Hope is often the greatest motivator for action. So really, I appreciate you sharing your perspectives. Before we finish up, we've a couple of pre-submitted questions, and I might just have time for maybe one or two quick ones just to maybe throw at you. How do you respond to criticism that Ireland's climate targets are ambitious on paper but weak in enforcement?
They are ambitious in paper, and I don't term. I think in terms of enforcement, I wouldn't say they're weak because there is those legal mechanisms in place. I suppose the big challenge is actually putting in place those policies, putting in place the financial support to actually activate those policies, and that's where the challenge is. And that requires money. It requires political will. I think we saw political will over the last 4 years because we suddenly got, like, people said we couldn't cut emissions by 7% in a year. Like, that was when the Greens went into government in 2020. We had a big debate, quite a robust debate in the party about, was 7% every year doable. We've proved it's doable, but the question is, it can't be once off. It needs to be replicated. And I think that whether there's that political will to continue that work is, I suppose, something that I think is a question right now. And that's one of the issues that I am, as a member of the Dáil, I'll be putting pressure on the new government about.
And lastly, how do you protect green spaces in urban areas like Dublin West while still trying to address the pressing need for housing?
Yeah, well, look, housing is such a challenge in our communities, and I meet so many, young people, but even middle-aged families as well, who are in real jeopardy of losing their homes or losing a rental home because maybe it's been put up for sale. So it's about increasing the densities. It's about using brownfield sites, using unused sites or underused sites within our cities and towns, and making sure we're building on those. You're probably aware there's a big idea now of using the Glasnevin industrial estate around the Tolka there between Glasnevin and Cabra, which has lots of kind of old warehouses as a high density housing zone. I think we need to be doing that. But we will need to build on greenfield sites as well. So it's about identifying the sites of greatest value in urban areas and giving them absolute protection. So our rivers, the Liffey, the Tolka, the Dollar, the Royal and Grand Canal, they are vital sites. They should absolutely be protected. And then where we have to build on greenfield sites, making sure that where we can integrate maybe a stand of trees or some old hedgerows, you don't have to tear them out and kind of put in manicured new flowers. Let's keep what we can keep, and make sure in every new development there are some areas kind of where biodiversity can thrive as well. So building on existing sites that are underutilized, building at higher density, protecting really valuable sites, and where we do use greenfield sites, making sure there is an element of environment, of biodiversity integrated to them. That's how I think we can address that huge challenge of the housing crisis, but at the same time protect and enhance nature, particularly in our cities and towns as well.
Thank you immensely, Roderic, for quite an incredible, insightful, and candid responses that you provided us today. I also want to thank everybody who joined us for this engaging discussion. And we hope that hopefully the conversation has enlightened and also inspired maybe further thought and action. Just to outline, our next event will start at 1 p.m. with Professor Jane Stout, who will be presenting on farmland pollinators and pollination, influence on policy and practice. And then later this afternoon, we'll also host a panel discussion on tipping points. How close are we? And what can Ireland do? I hope everyone has a wonderful World Environment Day. And on behalf of everyone here today, I'd like to thank Roderic O'Gorman once again for his time and his energy and his responses to the questions. Thanks again.
Thanks so much, Michael. Really, really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you all on World Environment Day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.